What is going on, guys? The NBA is no different than the NFL, NHL, and MLB. They're always looking to introduce new rules in order to enhance in-game quality and the overall experience for fans. But out of all four major North American professional sports leagues, it feels like the NBA has introduced the most rule changes. Compare the modern day rulebook to the one they had 10, 30, 50, or even 70 years ago, and you'll see a whole lot of differences. Inspired by a large number of their own star players, the NBA has introduced a plethora of rule changes that impacted the game forever. So let's get right into it. Make sure to subscribe to TPS and put on your notifications. We post videos all the time. New videos all the time. Subscribe. Number 15, Dikembe Mutombo, banning the finger wag. He was one of the greatest defensive players ever. He was a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner. He led the league in rebounding twice and in blocks 3 years in a row from 1994 to 96. This guy became famous for his finger wagging celebration, a way of saying no, no, no to players who tried scoring on him. But the league decided that Mutombo's finger wag was unsportsmanlike and disrespectful. So officials later began issuing a technical foul if he used the gesture. But he had fun with the rule and would actually start doing it towards the crowd instead. Because he wasn't doing it to opposing players, officials weren't allowed to hit him with a technical foul. Number 14, Derrick Harper, hand-checking rule. Harper was among the better defenders of his era, earning NBA All-Defensive Second Team selections twice in his career. Harper became renowned for his hand-checking defense, where he'd place his hands on the offensive player with the ball. As a member of the New York Knicks, Harper would do this on Michael Jordan whenever he played the Chicago Bulls. So ahead of the 1994-95 season, the NBA emphasized that officials were required to monitor and crack down on the hand-checking. The league has since banned hand-checking altogether. Number 13, Derrick Rose, 30% rule. There's an NBA rule widely named after the 2011 league MVP. The Derrick Rose rule allows a player coming off his rookie deal to sign a contract that takes up to 30% of their team's salary cap space, as opposed to only 25%. That is only if the player has earned one of the following: an MVP award, 2 All-Star selections, or 2 All-NBA team selections. In December 2011, Rose signed a deal that was reportedly worth $94.8 million with the Bulls. The rule also means NBA teams aren't allowed to trade to players who carry contracts under the Rose rule. That's why the Boston Celtics were unable to trade for Anthony Davis while they still had Kyrie Irving during the 2018-19 trade deadline. So C's fans can blame Rose and his rule for destroying the chance of seeing a Davis-Irving dynamic duo in Beantown. Number 12, Allan Iverson and Carmelo Anthony league dress code. Prior to the start of the 2005-06 NBA season, Commissioner David Stern revealed a new dress code. The rule change outlined that players were to wear proper business clothing before and after games. If they were injured and on the sidelines, the players also had to wear business attire. Allan Iverson and Carmelo Anthony wore these such items, and the former was one of the most critical voices against the rule change. Thus, their names are attached to the league dress code rules. Iverson was quoted as telling the Philadelphia Daily News, "Just because you put a guy in a tuxedo, it doesn't mean he's a good guy." Number 11. Gilbert Arenas, the provision rule. The Washington Wizards handed Golden State Warriors star Gilbert Arenas a 6-year, $60 million offer sheet in 2003. Arenas had only played 2 seasons with the Warriors, but since they were over the salary cap, the club was unable to retain him. But there was an exception to this rule. If Arenas was a first-round pick, the Warriors would have been permitted to match the offer and keep Arenas. Too bad he was actually a second-round pick. Well, the NBA decided that was unfair, so they addressed it 2 years later. In the 2005 CBA, the Gilbert Arenas rule was introduced. It simply allowed teams to match offer sheets for players who were second-round picks. Thanks to the mid-level exception, it also limited how much money other teams could hand out in an offer sheet. Number 10, Allan Houston rule. In 2001, the New York Knicks handed All-Star guard Allan Houston a 6-year contract extension worth $100.4 million. But inquiries and age quickly led to a decline in Houston's play, and the Knicks were stuck with a bad contract on their hands. The new NBA CBA was agreed upon in 2005, and it granted teams a one-time amnesty clause. This clause allowed teams to waive one player without having to pay any more luxury tax on players' contract. It was widely believed that the Knicks would waive Houston, who had $40 million left in his contract. That's why this rule was named after Houston. However, the Knicks actually used their amnesty clause on Jerome instead, clearing $21.3 million in the process. Kind of funny how a rule was named after a guy even though the rule never ended up applying to him. Number 9. Dwyane Wade's Rip Move Banned. Former Miami Heat star and 3-time NBA champion Dwyane Wade had a signature rip move. It was a maneuver where an offensive player would move into the arms of a defensive player in hopes of drawing a foul. Kevin Durant also had the play in his repertoire. It was a tricky but smart move, and smaller players like Wade were able to take advantage of bigger players and their longer arms. But ahead of the 2011-12 season, the league decided to crack down on that. Apparently, the league thought the rip move was unfair gamesmanship, so the rule change outlined that if an official calls a foul on the rip move, it's only a shooting foul if a player began a shooting motion. Number 8. Larry Bird exception. The Boston Celtics icon led the team to 3 NBA championships in his career, and he took home a trio of MVP awards as well. But even though his career ended nearly 3 decades ago, Bird's impact on the NBA is still felt today. After all, the veteran free agent exception rule is widely referred to as the Larry Bird exception or bird rights. So why is his name tied to the exception? It's because the NBA introduced a salary cap in 1983, and at the time teams weren't allowed to go over the cap. No ifs, ands, or buts. But the league initially eased its salary cap rules. If Bird signed a $15 million contract with the Celtics in 1983, this was one of the initial circumstances where the league allowed Boston to go over the salary cap. So his name is forever linked to the rule. In simple terms, the Larry Bird exception lets teams go over the salary cap if they re-sign their own players. So if you hate the whole idea of super teams, you can blame the Larry Bird rule. Number 7. Leroy Edwards rule. Indiana sports legend Leroy Edwards was one of the first true superstars ever seen in the game. Edwards was ultra dominant in the National Basketball League, winning 2 league championships and a trio of MVP awards. One reason Edwards was virtually unstoppable? He was physical and aggressive around the basket. The NCAA introduced the 3-second rule that forbids an offensive player from being in the key for more than 3 seconds. Hey, when you're that much better than everybody else, sometimes a rule change is the only way to stop you. Number 6. Reggie Miller rule. Indiana Pacers legend and Basketball Hall of Famer Reggie Miller had a signature leg kick maneuver which helped draw fouls on 3-point shots. Miller would kick his legs out in order to draw contact on the defender. The refs would buy into this tactic quite often, as Miller became the master of the 4-point play. But the league finally had enough and decided to crack down on the move prior to the 2011-12 season, several years after Reggie's retirement. In October 2012, it was reported that the league officials would strictly enforce the Reggie Miller rule, which meant more offensive fouls would be called for players who tried the signature leg kick move. You can only play dirty for so long. Number 5. Trent Tucker rule. The New York Knicks hosted the Chicago Bulls in a casual regular season game on January 15, 1990. Nobody knew that this regular season contest was going to change the NBA rulebook forever. The game was tied 106 apiece, and the Knicks were about to inbound with less than a second remaining on the clock. Knicks guard Trent Tucker took the inbound pass and fired it home at the buzzer for the game-winning basket. Bulls head coach Phil Jackson protested the play. Though the Bulls weren't successful in their protest, Mr. Stern introduced the Trent Tucker rule. The rule outlines that a shot will not count if it's taken after an inbound pass with less than 0.3 seconds left to go. So in short, at least 0.3 seconds must remain on the clock during an inbound pass for any shot that follows to count. If there's less than 0.3 seconds remaining, only a tip-in will count as a basket. Tucker burned the Bulls with that shot that changed the rulebook. Ironically, his NBA season was as a member of the Bulls in 1992-93, and he won a championship with them that year before retiring. Number 4. Shaquille O'Neal, HACK-A-SHAQ. It was virtually impossible to stop Shaquille O'Neal at the rim, but NBA teams devised a smart strategy to slow down the 4-time champion and 15-time All-Star. While coaching the Dallas Mavericks, Don Nelson came up with the HACK-A-SHAQ strategy. He got his players to do it on Dennis Rodman, but the strategy was used a lot more on Shaq down the road. Because O'Neal was such a porous free throw shooter, it made perfect sense to send him to the foul line rather than give him the easy 2 and close. A few years after Shaq's retirement, Commissioner Adam Silver introduced a rule change that cracked down on the HACK-A-SHAQ strategy prior to the 2016-17 season. This new rule emphasized the following: the current rule for away from the play fouls applicable to the last 2 minutes of the 4th period and last 2 minutes of any overtime, pursuant to which the fouled team is awarded 1 free throw and retains possession of the ball. The league wanted to cut back on HACK-A-SHAQ situations, seeing a major spike in the strategy during the 2015-16 season. Silver projected that the new rules would reduce away from the ball fouls by 45%. Number 3. Charles Barkley, The 5-second rule. Barkley is one of the most dominant big men in NBA history. He was nearly unstoppable at the rim, and it got to the point where league officials thought Barkley's style of play was ruining the fun of basketball. Barkley would turn his back to the rim and force defenders behind him to keep backing up until they were under the rim, thus allowing him to make an easy layup. The league wanted its gameplay to be faster, so they introduced the 5-second rule, often referred to as the Charles Barkley rule. The rule detailed that players could not be below the free throw line for more than 5 seconds, as Barkley would do this for up to 20 seconds at a time. In an interview with ESPN, Barkley said that he actually liked the rule and said it would help him score more. So there's that. George Mikan, the Mikan rule. Mikan played for the Chicago American Gears of the NBL and later on the Minneapolis Lakers. One of the top players of the 40s and 50s, Mikan won 5 championships and the 1948 NBL MVP award. He was perhaps the most influential basketball player of his era. He was so dominant as a player that the league decided they had to introduce a handful of changes. His signature hook shot was unstoppable to the point where the Mikan rule was introduced in 1951. So what was the rule? Oh, just the league deciding to widen the lane from 6 feet up to 12 feet. Not only that, but teams would try to purposely waste time and keep the ball out of Mikan's hands. So the league introduced the 24-second shot clock rule. Oh, but there's more. The NBL and NCAA both also banned defensive goaltending. That's because Mikan was so tall and athletic at 6'10" that he was able to jump up and swat the ball away before it even went through the hoop. Number 1, Wilt Chamberlain. A whole bunch of rule changes. The game of basketball we all know and love today wouldn't be in its current stage without Wilt Chamberlain. He's brought immense popularity to the NBA in the late 50s and throughout the entire 60s decade. Chamberlain is the only player to ever score 100 points in one game. He won 2 NBA championships, earned 13 All-Star selections, and was named the league MVP 4 times. Chamberlain was so dominant that he inspired the NBA to make numerous rule changes. For example, if he missed a free throw, Chamberlain was able to grab the rebound quickly and dunk it for the score. So the league implemented a rule that disallows players to cross the foul line after a free throw until the ball hits the rim. Chamberlain's dominance also forced the league to introduce offensive goaltending as well as widening the lanes, with the intention of distancing players of his size away from the basket. That's what makes Chamberlain such a basketball icon. He was so ridiculous that the league had to enforce several rule changes that are still in existence today. Which other NBA players were responsible for rule changes? Join me in the comment section below. What else you should do is go follow myself and TPS on social media. We post great content all the time. We have pretty good content, so yeah, go follow. Make sure to subscribe to TPS on YouTube because we post videos every single day. Every day is a new video. Subscribe. If you like this video, make sure to like it because it really helps us out and we appreciate it. We appreciate you. You're great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, you, eating the cereal. Well, you know what? You're doing great. Enjoy that Fruity Pebbles. Of course, thank you so much for watching. I'm Jason Biondo. I'll see you next time.
On my knee.